Hello, and welcome back to the special spiritual calisthenics for the Passion. Continuing on with Gospel number 2. At that time Jesus went forth with his disciples across the Kidron Valley, where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. Now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas, procuring a band of soldiers and some officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, went there with the lanterns and torches and weapons. Then Jesus, knowing all that was to befall him, came forward and said to them, Whom do you seek? They answered him, Jesus of Nazareth. He said to him, I am he. Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. When he said to them, I am he, they drew back and fell to the ground. Again he asked them, Whom do you seek? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus answered, I told you that I am he. So if you seek me, let these men go. This was to fulfill the word which was spoken, Of those whom you gave me, I lost not one. Now what's interesting about this is that Jesus Christ is well known in the region. And these people that have got the swords, the clubs, they're ready for a fight because they think the disciples are going to fight for Jesus Christ. And they know what Jesus Christ looks like. Judas especially knows what Jesus Christ looks like. But this gospel passage shows us this idea that somehow they don't recognize him. Shows us that Jesus Christ, his arrest, his passion, everything that is about to befall to him is by his authority that it is happening. Just before this, we had the prayer in which Jesus Christ asked that the cup pass from him. Nevertheless, not my will, but thy will be done. Once again, showing that Jesus Christ is voluntarily going to his passion, that it is not by their design that he is captured and killed. Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's slave and cut off his right ear. The slave's name was Malchus. Jesus said to Peter, Put your sword into its sheath. Shall I not drink the cup which the Father has given me? So the band of soldiers and their captain and the officers of the Jews seized Jesus and bound him. First they led him to Annas, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year. It was Caiaphas who had given counsel to the Jews that it was expedient that one man should die for the people. In other words, that Jesus Christ, by him dying, might save the Jewish people from the anger of the Romans. Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. As this disciple was known to the high priest, he entered the court of the high priest along with Jesus, while Peter stood outside the door. Of course, this is the way that an author speaks about himself. This is John the theologian. So the other disciple who was known to the high priest went out and spoke to the maid who kept the door and brought Peter in. The maid who kept the door said to Peter, Are you not one of this man's disciples? He said, I am not. Now the servants and officers had made a charcoal fire because it was cold, and they were standing and warming themselves. Peter also was with them, standing and warming himself. The high priest then questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. Jesus answered him, I have spoken openly to the world. I have always taught in the synagogues and in the temple, where all the Jews come together. I have said nothing secretly. Why do you ask me? Ask those who have heard me what I said to them. They know what I said. When Jesus had said this, one of the officers standing by struck Jesus with his hand, saying, Is that how you answer the high priest? Jesus answered him, If I have spoken wrongly, bear witness to the wrong. But if I have spoken rightly, why do you strike me? Now, what's interesting about this moment where Jesus Christ is speaking back to the officer that struck him is that Jesus Christ tells us to turn the other cheek, to basically willing to take both hits on behalf of others. But Jesus Christ is not telling us to be a doormat or to allow people to behave in this way. So he is not telling you to just be willing to take abuse for no good reason. Annas then sent him bound to Caiaphas the high priest. Now Simon Peter was standing and warming himself. They said to him, Are you not also one of his disciples? He denied it and said, I am not. One of the servants of the high priest, a kinsman of the one whose ear Peter had cut off, asked, Did I not see you in the garden with him? Peter again denied it, and at once the cock crowed. Then they led Jesus from the house of Caiaphas to the praetorium. It was early. They themselves did not enter the praetorium, so that they might not be defiled, but might eat the Passover. So we're going to skip forward through a little bit of Gospel 3. They brought him to Caiaphas bound, and now the chief priests and the whole council sought false testimony against Jesus that they might put him to death, but they found none, though many false witnesses came forward. At last, 2 came forward and said, "This fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days." And the high priest stood up and said, "Have you no answer to make? What is it that these men testify against you?" But Jesus was silent. And the high priest said to him, "I adjure you by the living God, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God." Jesus said to him, "You have said so, but I tell you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power, coming on the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his robes and said, "He has uttered blasphemy," because at this moment Jesus Christ has unabashedly said, "I am God." And so at a show of his rage, the high priest has ripped his clothes. And so all the lies, all the people that he brought forward to lie about Jesus, it wasn't working. But Jesus Christ is now openly declared, because he said, "I swear to you, I swear by heaven and earth, tell me if you are the God." And Jesus Christ tells him, "You have said so." Then the high priest tore his robes and said, "He has uttered blasphemy. Why do we still need witnesses? You have heard his blasphemy. What is your judgment?" They answered, "He deserves death." Then they spat in his face and struck him. Some slapped him, saying, "Prophesy to us, you Christ. Who is it that struck you?" Now Peter was sitting outside the courtyard, and a maid came up to him and said, "You were also with Jesus the Galilean." But he denied it before them all, saying, "I do not know what you mean." And when he went out to the porch, another maid saw him, and she said to the bystanders, "This man was with Jesus of Nazareth." And again he denied it with an oath, "I do not know the man." After a little while the bystanders said to Peter, "Certainly you are also one of them, for your accent betrays you." Then he began to invoke a curse on himself and to swear, "I do not know the man." And immediately the cock crowed. And Peter remembered the saying of Jesus, "Before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times." And he went out and wept bitterly. Now what's important, what you just heard, was these kind of almost variances on how Peter denied Christ, because Jesus Christ said, "You deny me 3 times, the cock will crow." What's showing us here is that the historicity is not necessarily that important. After all, none of these were written until 30 years after the fact. So trying to remember all of these exact details of who talked to whom is very, very difficult. But what happened, the main focus is what's important, that Jesus was denied 3 times by Peter, and then the cock crowed. That is what's truly important here. So please don't get lost on the idea of like, okay, wait a second, how many people did Peter deny Jesus to? That's not the important part. I hope that you've enjoyed this second part of our Passion